You have a talk about reactive programming in
Yes.
Java. So tell us a little bit, so it's a little bit of a buzzword, so tell us what concretely, what functionality are we talking about? What are we talking about when we talk about reactive programming?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You're right that reactive programming has become kind of a buzzword in the recent years. So basically, to me, reactive programming is about creating systems that respond to events as they happen. So it's pretty much a cool name for a collection of principles that allow us to create systems that are responsive. And to be responsive, you want to be elastic, you want to be able to handle varying loads, and you want to be resilient to failure, which doesn't necessarily mean that you can't throw errors, you just need to be able to handle them well, and you need to be able to contain them. And as it turns out, a very good way to becoming elastic and resilient is to be message-driven, particularly when it comes to asynchronous messaging. So these are kind of the four basic properties behind reactive systems. So in this context, we talk specifically about the JDK, and it's basically kind of a view on reactive programming from sort of a wider context. We don't talk about a particular framework, we talk about what are the building blocks for reactive programming that we have available in the JDK right now.
And so what are they?
Yeah, there's a few of them. So the talk is essentially kind of an overview of the history of Java and where things were added and how they contribute to the reactive programming. So we start with really basic stuff like simple threads, and then we build up. We go through futures, callables, executor services, all the way through completable futures and fork join pool, and we wrap up with reactive streams and the new HTTP2 client in Java 11.
Okay, so going back to just reactive programming, so what are concrete the concept in Java that people need to understand?
It basically all comes down to doing parallel programming effectively. So the really core construct is completable future from Java 8, and then everything else kind of builds on top of that. And then obviously, starting with Java 9, it's the new Reactive Streams API. Very typically with reactive programming, you're talking about streaming models.
Do you also dive into those features in your presentation? Or?
One thing to mention maybe is that the whole talk is a live coding exercise. I literally only have about 4 slides. So we basically go through all these things and just demonstrate them on a series of examples so that people really get the hang of it.
What are the misconceptions about those reactive programming that you've encountered?
A very common question is, how do these things that we have in the JDK fit into what I would actually want to use in practice? How do they align with all the reactive streams libraries that we have, or higher level frameworks like Spring or Vertex? So it's very important to draw the line. This is what you can do with Java, and maybe this is why you shouldn't use this directly. Maybe this is why you should trust the reactive library. So that's also part of the talk, kind of point at features that are available elsewhere, but maybe not yet in the JDK, and maybe they will never be in the JDK. So with the libraries, we kind of just hint on them, but basically, the two really main ones for Java are RxJava and Project Reactor, which are both very good, tested in practice, backed by very large companies. And they provide a bunch of things that are not available in the JDK right now. JDK, for example, only provides the API for reactive streams, and this library obviously implemented as well. They also provide a whole range of operators that you can use, and just overall things for monitoring, tracing, and just features that make it easier for you to develop all these things in practice.
And so, do you use any of those in your work?
We are moving more towards Spring 5 and its reactive model.
Oh. And anything else? So are you also blogging or doing it?
I do have a blog that I contribute to occasionally. It's just my first and last name.com. Yeah, feel free to check it out. And yeah, otherwise there's a lot of materials on YouTube and elsewhere.
And your presentation will be recorded anyway. So
yeah, I typically speak about features of the JDK and that sort of thing.
Cool. How do you feel about the new release cadence?
I'm very excited. I think it's a good thing. People are hesitant at the moment still, but I think ultimately, as has been pointed out many times but by other people, it doesn't really change the velocity of things as they're being developed. It changes how quickly they arrive to you. So I think it's a good thing.